Russia closely followed China to commemorate the victory over Japan, which has a deep meaning behind it. September 3rd is the statutory commemoration date for the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression. In our country, on February 27, 2014, the 7th meeting of the Standing Committee of the 12th National People's Congress passed a vote to determine September 3rd as the day of the Chinese People's Anti-Japanese War. Victory Day. This day is very important to China, and grand commemorative ceremonies are held every year. Interestingly, on September 3, 2023, Russia also ushered in its first Victory Day in the war against Japanese militarism, and Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk in the Russian Far East held celebrations. Then, we can't help but ask, why did Russia suddenly follow China in setting up a victory anniversary against Japan? What's more, the anniversary was named Victory Day against Japanese militarism. What's the mystery behind this? In Zhanhao's view, there are three main reasons why Russia did this. First, Russia has also further established its legitimacy as the victorious country in World War II. Objectively speaking, in the anti-fascist war of World War II, the Soviet Union suffered the most losses and the worst casualties in the world, with 60 million casualties, and its influence has continued to this day. However, in order to weaken Russia's position in today's world political and economic order, the United States and the West have been trying to downplay the historical position of the Soviet Union in the anti-fascist war in the past few years. Russia also determined September 3rd as the victory day of the militarist war against Japan. The fundamental reason was to fix the history of the Soviet Union's war against Japan at that time. The second is that Russia must work with China to guard against the United States and Japan. Russia has a small population, especially in the Far East, but its population is only 6 to 7 million, which is the level of a prefecture-level city in China. The vast land and sparse population make Moscow distrust anyone. In the past, it was difficult for China and Russia to develop the Far East because of the suspicion of the Kremlin. Now, under the pressure of sanctions from the US and the West, Russia is ready to start working with China to develop the Far East. However, at this time, Japan completely fell to the United States geographically, and was still planning to join NATO. For Russia, the pressure from the West is already huge. If Japan and South Korea join NATO, the strategic pressure on Russia in Northeast Asia will be the greatest. The reason is simple. For Japan, which will face the sinking of the country sooner or later, he wants to go to the mainland at any time. In this context, Japan is going to join NATO, and Russia must be worried that Japan is coveting the territory of the Far East. Against this background, Russia has a very strong strategic appeal to guard against the United States and Japan together with China, which is one of the important reasons why he set the victory day of the war against Japanese militarism as September 3rd. The third is that Russia has discovered an opportunity to carve up Japan in the future. Many people may not know in 1945, China, the United States and Britain jointly issued the Potsdam Proclamation, which explained Japan's post-war treatment. At the same time, according to the Potsdam Proclamation and the treaty between China and the United States, China had the right to station troops in Japan. The Cairo Declaration and the Potsdam Proclamation mainly dealt with Japan in three aspects. One was to completely castrate Japanese militarism, the other was to try and deal with Japanese war criminals, and the third was to reform Japan. It clearly stipulates that until the above objectives are achieved and a peaceful and responsible government is established, the Allies will occupy Japan. The relevant occupation plan at that time was as follows: the Soviet Union occupied the Kuril Islands, Hokkaido, and the northeastern part of Honshu Island, the United States occupied the central part of Honshu Island, the Kanto area, and Kinki, Chinese occupation. In addition, there is Sino-British co-administration of Osaka Prefecture, Tokyo is under Sino-Soviet, U.S.U.K co-administration, and the Ryukyu Islands are under Sino-U.S co-administration. However, this plan failed to be realized due to the sudden changes in the post-war situation and the domestic situation of various countries. In the end, only the United States actually implemented the occupation of Japan, and finally led the reshaping of Japan's post-war order. In July 1945, before the victory of the anti-Japanese war, China and the United States also signed the Memorandum of China's Occupation Forces in Japan, which stipulated that China has the right to garrison troops in Ike Prefecture, Japan, and the division headquarters will be located in Nagoya, Mie and Shizuoka prefectures. The United States even proposed to Chiang Kai-shek that Ryukyu should be managed by the Chinese garrison, but Chiang Kai-shek believed that Roosevelt was trying to test him, and he firmly not followed. This memorandum clearly stipulates invalidation, that is, it must be agreed by both China and the United States. However, China has so far not agreed to the lapse of the memorandum, which means that under international law, China has the right to station troops in Japan. The big countries are well aware of the story behind this. The reason why China was unable to garrison Japan was because, on the one hand, China had changed dynasties, and on the other hand, the United States actually occupied it. China's national strength was not enough to allow China to garrison Japan. However, although China was unable to do so in the past, international law is there. Now, the United States is trying to introduce NATO into the Pacific Ocean and push Japan to join NATO. Obviously, this is a violation of international law. However, in this case, the United States and Japan are accelerating all this, which means that in the future, the United States, Japan, and other countries are likely to collide with China and Russia in the Western Pacific. With China's current national strength, if a direct conflict breaks out between China and the United States, the main battlefield will definitely not be in Taiwan province of my country, but in Japan itself. If China, the United States, Russia, and other countries break out geopolitical conflicts in Japan, there will inevitably be two results. One is a world war, and the main battlefield will be Eastern Europe and East Asia. Russia has repeatedly threatened to attack Japan, and there is something behind it. On September 3rd, Russia ushered in the first celebration of the Victory Day of the war against Japanese militarism. The vice chairman of the Russian Federation Security Council Medvedev criticized the Japanese government for implementing a new national militarization policy, and some people continue to try to tamper with it. History and justify war crimes. Medvedev made a clear warning that Japan should learn from history and make every effort to avoid igniting the fire of World War III. Abandon militaristic plans to benefit its own people. Just imagine, what Wei Defoe emphasizes here is Japan ignited the fire of World War III. Why did he say that? Because, once the United States and Japan in East Asia want to fight China and Russia, it will definitely be World War III. Therefore, whether the three wars will be fought depends on Japan. Once Japan cooperates, the risk will be great. Then, once a fight starts, Russia will inevitably join the war, and China, the United States and Russia will compete in Japan. In fact, at the United Nations General Assembly on August 29, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova said, if it is detected that Japan's nuclear sewage exceeds the standard, Russia will use force to solve the problem. Regarding this, Zhang previously it has also been analyzed that Russia sees that the nuclear sewage issue may lead to geopolitical competition between major powers against Japan in the future, and the core connotation of Russia's statement is that Russia is also qualified to compete for carving up Japan in the future. Frankly speaking, the risk in East Asia is very high now, because the US and Japan are promoting the tension in the region. In the future, once a direct conflict between major powers breaks out in this region because of China's actions to unify Taiwan, a world war may break out. At that time, the big powers will inevitably fight in Japan, and the final result of Japan as a country will be divided up by the big powers. After World War II, due to the situation, the result of partitioning Japan could not be realized. If the Third War broke out, Japan would inevitably be partitioned. This is determined by the current power structure of the world's major powers, as well as Japan's geographical location and its political position. Little Japan does not learn well, and the future is divided up. This may be the future fate of the Japanese.